Okay, it's 25 to, so we'll make a start. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. This is one of our community conversations regarding the cost of living crisis, which we're all going through at the moment. My name is Councillor Gareth Roberts. I'm the leader of the council, and I'll be hosting for this evening. We've got various people who are going to either present or try to answer questions as best as they can for you. We have Nancy Baldwin, Councillor Nancy Baldwin, who is the Vice Chair of the Finance Committee, and she has a special responsibility for communities. We have Councillor Robin Brown, who is effectively the money man within the council. He is the lead member for finance and property. We have Fenella Merry, who is the Director of Resources. She's the senior, one of the most senior financial officers within the council. Alex Wilson is the Interim Assistant Director of Resources, brackets Revenue Services at Richmond Council. Aveen Katan is the Head of Programmes at Richmond. Peter Ford is our Technical Support Manager. Ian Dodds is the Director of Children's Services at Achieving for Children, which is our shared service with Kingston for our children's services and education. We're also joined by Lorna Reid, who is the Chief Executive at Citizens Advice Richmond. Lucy Byrne, who is the Chief Executive at Richmond AID, and Susan Chappell, who is the Project Lead of the South West London Energy Advice Partnership. I understand we also have the Chief Executive of the Council with us, Mike Jackson. I see Richard Bennett, who is the Opposition Leader of the Green Party, and various other councillors represented. So thank you very much to all of them for coming along this evening. Now, tonight it's a non-political meeting, so we're hoping that everybody's going to get along and not make breezy points, because we're trying to do what we can during these largely unprecedented, at least within recent times, unprecedented times, to try to assist people as much as we can as a council with the cost of living crisis. Now, there's going to be a few general ground rules for this evening. If you are going to speak, you will see a little thing pop up on your screen where we will invite you to unmute. You don't need to switch your camera on if you don't want to. I appreciate that it may be you want to ask a question but don't necessarily want to either give your name or be identified. The reason why I'm making that clear is that this is being recorded and will be hosted on the council's website. If you can, keep your question concise. If you can, that would be a great help, because the more we have concision, the more we can get through questions. What we're going to have in a moment is a presentation from Aveen, who will take us through what we're doing at the moment. Then we'll go into a question and answer session where you can log your question. If you can use the raised hand function, you know, the little yellow hand thing that goes up, rather than actually physically raising your hand on the screen, because I can't see everybody on these screens. So if you use the raise hand function, then I will try and come to you. We've got some questions which have been submitted in advance. However, it could be that we'd be here for 2 hours with us just reading out pre-submitted questions at you, and that will get terribly boring terribly quickly. So we're going to try and mix it up with some questions from the floor and questions which have been submitted in advance. So hopefully that all makes sense. If there are any questions which you have, please do feel free to make use of the chat function, and we'll try and address those as well for you. And what we will do now is go straight into the presentation for this evening, and that's Aveen who's going to take us through. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Hello, everyone. I'm going to cover 3 areas in my presentation. So the key drivers that are behind the cost of living crisis, the impact it's having locally, and what the council is doing along with its partners to respond. I'll cover the drivers and their impact off quite quickly. Effie, if you can move on to the next slide, if that's okay, because I think probably people are quite well aware of these at this point. So 4 key drivers that I've got up on screen there: energy, transport, food and housing account for 2/3 of inflationary increase. Energy, that's primarily driven by supply and demand issues, and also the war in Ukraine. The impact of that is that this year energy bills will cost nearly double what they did last winter, and that's even accounting for the energy price guarantee. transport, the cost of fuel has increased as suppliers have struggled to keep up with post-pandemic demand, and the pound's weakness against the dollar is also a factor there. For food, energy and transport costs have had a knock-on effect on food production costs and logistics, but also reduced cereal exports from Russia and Ukraine are a factor there too. And for housing in the London market, this is really about landlords leaving the market, selling their properties post-pandemic, and then renters re-entering, which is driving up rental prices, and then more recently interest rate hikes leading to higher mortgage rates. And that's impacting on stretched homeowners and also private renters as landlords pass on costs. I hope you can see me. I'm not 100% sure whether you can, but hopefully you can. So just moving on to the next slide about local impact. So Richmond is a relatively prosperous borough. So that means we're pretty well placed to respond to the challenges for most people. But there are people in the borough who will face considerable financial hardship. And a lot of those will be those who are already on low incomes. But in this crisis, there are also many who, for them, it's the first time that they'll actually need support with their finances. A lot of those most affected are going to be people in energy efficient homes, private renters, mortgagers, and larger households. And when we know it's not just about the financial impacts, there are wider health and well-being impacts. Stress is a big one, especially with this crisis coming so hot on the heels of the pandemic. So who are the groups of people that are impacted within the borough? We've been doing a lot of data analysis, and that's enabled us to identify 4 key groups, which are on the next slide. So these 4 groups are mutually exclusive. So top left, low income private renters, we've got over 2,000 households in that category in the borough. Key concerns for them would be around private rental costs, especially if they're going to move to a new accommodation. Housing insecurity is a concern for them. Energy costs are an issue, particularly where they're working from home, and public transport costs. Top right, low income social renting families. We've got over 4,000 of those households. Energy costs are a big issue for them. They may well be on prepayment meters or not paying by direct debit. Food costs are an issue where they have dependents to feed, and they are likely facing increased costs of childcare as well. Bottom left, lower income older residents. We've got almost 3,500 of those types of households in the borough. Energy costs are a major issue for them, particularly as they're requiring more heating to keep warm often due to health and well-being related issues associated with age. And a high proportion of that group may also have issues with health and be affected by isolation. And finally, bottom right, low income families with mortgages. Many in this group might be facing fixed term mortgages ending, higher rates, or not being able to get another fixed term mortgage. They are likely facing increased costs of childcare again, and energy costs and travel to work also an issue. So just moving on to the next slide, where in the borough are we seeing these impacts? So we've got a relatively low proportion of people in the borough in income deprivation, second lowest in London. But the map on this slide, the red areas show where there are higher concentrations of people in income deprivation. And that pretty much mirrors the distribution of people claiming universal credit, housing benefit, and unemployment benefits as well. We know that people in lower income households spend a greater proportion of their household income on essentials like energy, food, and housing, which obviously means they'll feel the increases to a greater extent. Low income households often are subject to a poverty premium as well. So essentially they pay more for the same costs and services. An example would be with energy, where they're paying more because they're on prepayment meters or not on direct debit. And then there's another impact a couple more impacts for them. They may be typically in lower paying sectors where pay growth has been even slower and really not kept up with inflation. And in some of those areas on the map, they'll be in parts of the borough where they're not as well connected to public transport, so might be spending more on travel costs as well. So moving on to the council's response swiftly. So in September, the council allocated £3 million to our support effort for residents, communities and businesses. So far, we've allocated almost 800k of that. And at the same time, we have been allocating our latest allocation of Household Support Fund, which is a fund from the government to support vulnerable households in the face of cost of living increases. We know that this is an unprecedented crisis, certainly in recent times, and for that reason we need to work together really closely with partners to coordinate our efforts and make the most of our resources. We also need to know from our local communities what are the issues that are most pressing for them. So while we have started planning our response around 8 priority themes that I've set out on screen, that's very much a starting point for action, and we know that we need to listen to feedback on that really and adjust as required as new intelligence emerges and as we kind of begin to see the impact of some of the things that we've been doing. So just working through those themes one by one on the next slide, data and analytics. The reason that we've identified data and analytics as a priority theme is because we know we need to direct the support to where it's needed most. And we also know that in this particular crisis, there are more households affected who haven't necessarily been engaged with our services before. So it's not as easy to target them effectively. Particular priorities within this work stream have been the procurement of a data platform called Lift. It's a low-income family tracker. Basically, it's a way of us helping us identifying families who need our support. The other area of focus within this work stream is on a single view of debt, and that's because debt's often an early indicator of vulnerability. We have people who have debt to a wide range of services across the council, and we think if we can get more joined up in our visibility of that, it will help us to identify people early and get them the right support before debt escalates. Moving on to the next slide, our second theme is around our cost of living hub. This is really about making sure that information about the support and advice available is easily available on our website, either for people to self-serve or for professionals and volunteers to guide them through that information. It's updated regularly. It includes a support calculator which directs people to what they're entitled to. We've also summarised that information in a leaflet that's gone out to every household, and comms are very much trying to promote that regularly, for example, via social media. Our third theme is around warm spaces. So we are in the process of establishing a network of safe and welcoming spaces in our community where residents can keep warm, but importantly, get linked into other services around the cost of living and indeed more broadly. So we have some council-run facilities, but there's also some in the VCS and faith venues as well. And we are advertising those via our cost of living hub. So I would encourage people, if they are aware of any venues that lend themselves to be in a warm space, encourage them to sign up on the hub. Next theme is around warm homes, and this is really about supporting more of our residents to live in energy efficient homes and therefore more affordably warm homes. As part of this theme, we've already funded Habitats and Heritage, given them additional funding to carry out more outreach around energy efficiency. But we're looking at other things too, including expanding our winter warmth service and energy efficiency packs for vulnerable households. Sorry, this is a whistle stop tour. The next themes are around financial resilience, and this is really about helping residents to avoid reaching the point where they're in financial crisis. Obviously, a very big part of that is about allocating funds like household support fund to make sure that vulnerable people get money into their pockets. But we also aware that partners are seeing a big uptick in people coming to them for advice around financial resilience. And that's why we've allocated additional funding for Citizens Advice, RAID and Age UK. Our Work Match service, who work to help people get into employment in the borough, are offering money management workshops, and we're planning a jobs fair for January. And we're also looking at how we can upskill our wider workforce in financial resilience issues. So no matter where people come into contact with staff in the council, that they'll have more ability to pick those issues up and direct the right support. Next slide is around food support. Our hub signposts to various existing sources of food support in the borough. Achievement for Children already do work around promoting uptake of free school meals and Healthy Start, and the work that I mentioned around our data and low-income family trackers will help target that even better. We're also providing access to food as part of our warm space offer in our youth centres. And food provision is one of the priorities within a grant funding pot that we've set up for the VCS, which is in the process of being decided how that's going to be allocated. Next slide, community resilience. This is really recognising it's not just individual households that are affected by this crisis, but organisations as well. And many organisations in voluntary, community and business sectors and faith sector too are feeling the pressure. And this is recognising that we need to do what we can to help those organisations survive through this crisis. One part of that is establishing a grant pot, which VCS organisations have been bid into over the last month. We're also providing support for small and medium businesses, advising them around how to reduce their energy use and other costs, and launching a Shop Local campaign to encourage residents to shop in the borough. Final slide, wellbeing and inclusion. And this is really in recognition of what I said early on, that we know that this isn't just about financial impacts, there's much wider impacts to the crisis as well. And we're looking at in a range of ways. Cost of living is being considered as part of our development of our mental health strategy. And we have just allocated some additional funding for an extra independent domestic abuse advocate, acknowledging the uptick in referrals that we're receiving as a consequence of the crisis as well. Final slide, next steps. We've got over £2 million worth of the pot still to allocate. We're closely looking at the impact of what we've done so far, so we can learn from experience over the last month or two, but we very much need feedback and input into the ongoing development of the response, and that's partly what events like this are about, I'm sure. Okay.
Okay. Thank you for that. I was just taking a quick squint in the chat, and I can see that Donovan has already stuck in there the web link. What you will hear a lot about this evening is the council's cost of living hub. And you can find the exact web address for that. I dare say if you go onto the council website and just pop cost of living hub into the search facility, it will bring you straight there. And I can also see a question has already gone in there. As well. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start off with one of our pre-submitted questions to give everybody a chance to start having a bit of a think about what it is that they may wish to ask. You may not have anything to ask and we can all go home really early, but I hope there are good ones. So the first question I've got as the pre-submitted is, where do the items which are donated to where do the items donated to supermarket food banks go? And Evine, even though you've just given us that presentation, you're on again, I'm afraid.
Doesn't seem fair. Yes, so it varies depending on the specific supermarket, but most of the big national chains have relationships with specific organisations. So, for example, in our borough, Tesco and Waitrose are partnered up with the Trussell Trust, and Trussell Trust has Richmond Food Bank in the borough. The Teddington Tesco donates to the Trussell Trust, and Asda also have a nationwide partnership with the Trussell Trust and Fairshare. Sainsbury's have partnership with Neighbourly and are a founding member of Fairshare. So it's usually connected to national organisations that then redistribute locally, but it depends on the individual shop concerned.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Rosemary Smith. You've asked, thank you for that, Avian. You've asked a question in the chat. Would you like to answer, put any particular additional information in this bin you'd like by asking it in person? We can unmute you. I think you've been unmuted.
Oh, thank you, Gareth. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Hello.
I have to admit, I am a Lib Dem member. I am so impressed. It looks very well organised. And unlike the government, it looks like it's been well planned. Are we in good health financially in Richmond Council?
Thank you. I must stress to everybody, I didn't plan Rosemary in the audience, but it's always nice to hear. Thank you for that. Robin Brown, I think I'll ask Robin Brown to come in on this one. But just looking to unmute him. There we go. There.
Thank you. I think I am unmuted. I couldn't do it myself. Well, thank you for the tee up, Rosemary. I think that the short answer is yes, we are in good financial health. So we have been responsibly managed financially. We, unlike many councils, we haven't invested huge amounts of money in speculative property deals or commercial business deals, so we don't have large quantities of debt hanging over us, and we have managed the finances so that we have some reserves. But having said all that, as a kind of good news, yes, we're basically in good shape. All councils are really struggling looking forward now to try and balance the books between how much we think we're going to need to spend and how much we can raise as revenue. So we're in good shape, but because of the scale of inflation at the moment, and what we get in terms of government funding, which isn't huge, and the demands on our services, because demands on social services in particular are going up at the moment, we're certainly faced with some challenges as we go forwards. But that's true of the whole local government sector, and we are relatively well placed, but it's a tough budget round that we're going through right now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Following on from that, I'm going to ask Fenella Mary to come in on this one. This is a pre-submitted question, but I think it's germane to what has just been said. Will there be cuts in funding local services in Richmond? No. Fenella Mary, if you may remember, is the chief money officer for the council for people who use easy to understand terms like me. Oh, you're not muted, Fenella, but we can see your mouse moving, but nothing coming out. Try again. No. What we'll do is we'll move on whilst we try and get this particular technical glitch sorted. I'll move on to Nikki Crookdake. Nikki Crookdake is in the audience, and Councillor Crookdake, I should say. So let's see if we can find you, Nikki, and we can unmute you, and you can ask the question. It's so much more interactive when people ask their own questions rather than just listening to me reading things out. Have we got Nikki on?
Yes, hello. Thank you, Gareth. It was a question really for Ian, just what AFC is doing and how they're using data analytics really to target needy families, or using other methods, particularly those that may not already be known to social services, because obviously the people who are known to social services, not so, it's easy-ish to identify, but those who may not already be known. Thank you.
Thank you. Have we got Ian on off mute? Ian Dodds. Ian Dodds. I
am off mute, I think. Ooh. Can you hear me?
You can. It's a terrible line.
It works. So we do use some data analytics already through our Strengthening Families programme, which brings together a number of data sources, both ours and the government data sources, to identify those families who most need our help. And so we would use that to target those families who are most at risk during the cost of living crisis.
Thank you. I'm going to see if we can get Fenella Mary. Oh, Alex has raised their hand, so let me see if we can ask Alex to unmute there. Alex may have further to add.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Aveen mentioned the low-income family tracker. One of the campaigns we plan to use the tracker for is a free school meals campaign where we identify low-income families that may be eligible for free school meals but aren't currently. So that's just something that we'll be doing early in the new year once we get the low-income family tracker up and running.
Thank you. And I understand that we are doing the free school meals voucher programme that we've done in the past for the school holidays. Is it for those children? It's £15 per week per child, is it?
That's right. So supermarket vouchers, £15 per week per child. So Christmas and then again at Easter, and in the summer we've run it as well. In addition to that, there's also the Fuel project, which is around activities for children and young people during school holidays, which also provides children and their families with a hot meal. Most importantly, though, as Alex says, we use free school meals as the eligibility for those programmes. And so if young people are eligible for free school meals and haven't registered, then I'd encourage them to do so that they can make the most of those services. So there's details on the council's website about how to apply for free school meals and to check your eligibility. can put that link in the chat.
And that's particularly important, the registration thing, is it? Because of the universal free school meals element. We don't want people dropping through the gaps.
So all children in reception year 1 and year 2 will get universal free school meals, so they don't need to apply for that, and they don't need to be eligible by being in receipt of benefits. But children in year 3 and above would need to be eligible and register for free school meals. So that's why it's important that they make sure that they check they're eligible and then register for them.
But how do we, sorry to talk on this one, folks, for a bit, but this is an important one. How do those kids who are in the universal free school meals, how do we make sure that they're getting the support? Because they're hidden in the crowd at the moment. So
we know all of those already, because we just give them to every child in reception year 1 and year 2.
Okay.
So they're automatically eligible for free school meals to the universal free school meal offer. But it's for those in year 3 and above where we need families to register so that they're eligible.
Excellent. Okay, well, thank you very much for that. I'm going to see if we can get Fenella Mary back. So I'm asking her to unmute.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm so sorry.
That's all right. So the question was, will there be cuts in funding local services in Richmond?
Okay, thank you. So as Councillor Brown said, it's a very challenging financial environment for all local authorities, but we are in a relatively good position. So anything that we do will be a measured response, and I think we have time to make sure that what we do going forward is the right thing to do and reflects the priorities for the council. So we are looking at things like efficiencies. We don't want to cut frontline services, obviously. So efficiencies, looking at the way we use our buildings, looking at the way we digitise our services, and really trying to make sure that we avoid funding cuts from local services, working very closely with partners, actually, which we know is an important part of the cost of living crisis response, but also going forward, delivering council services in partnership is something that we're going to be focusing on. So all that said, we will do everything we can to avoid impacting frontline services, but ultimately we will have to, have a good look and see if there's anything that we can do differently, do either in a different way or funding a different way. We're going to have to look at our income sources. There's lots of things that we can do, but ultimately, at the moment, the financial challenge, we're going to have to address it somehow.
Thank you. Those of you who are able to see the chat will see that Philip Mushy has put in a very useful comment regarding the fact that Waitrose, Tesco and Cavan Bakery all donate to the Real Junk Food Project, to the Twickenham branch that delivers at the Etna Centre 3 times a week. Now, people might not know what the Real Junk Food Project is, Philip, so how about you give us a quick cook's tour of what the Real Junk Food Project is? I'll be able to get you unmuted. There we go. Oh, we're having the same problem that we had with you, Philip, with Fenella. We can see you talking, but not hear anything. Let's try muting you and invite you to unmute again. So let's try that again. No, I'm sorry. Try that. Yeah, try without the headphones.
Is that better?
That's the way. There we go.
So apologies, I didn't expect to be speaking. But the Real Junk Food Project, it was set up a few years ago by Penny and others. It works out of the Etna Centre in St Margaret's, and it's associated with a charitable organisation called Food Share. Through Food Share, we're alerted to stores that have got food that is just on the cusp or has just passed its sell-by date, but is perfectly okay to eat. A number of us, and we go around on Monday, Wednesdays and Fridays collecting from these stores, from which our colleagues make the most incredible meals for residents who otherwise wouldn't be able to fund meals on their own. They can either have them for free or for a very, very nominal amount of money. And recently, we've also been allowing people to take away food as well. Now, I think, though I am not certain, but I know it's on the council hub, the cost of living hub, and I know it's also on our own webpage, and I think I've given you the link in the chat, that the Etna Centre, we open on Monday, Wednesday and Friday, and in Hampton, I think Gareth Roberts, Councillor Roberts will probably know that we also open on a Wednesday on Hampton Hill. But it's a great service, and you know, I and others are proud to be a member of it. So please have a look at the link both on the council site and on our website, and please do take it up.
That's useful stuff. Thank you for that, Philip. Let me just see. There's a question in the chat from Nicolette. This is going to sort of chime in, I think, with the next pre-submitted question. So I won't bring you in at this stage, Nicolette. But Nicolette's comment is that not everybody are online or have, you know, they've got landlines, they've got old mobiles, and they cannot access services. And then there's the fear of social workers and poverty being a reason to take children from the home. So I'm not going to focus on the last bit, but it's about how people can apply, because we've been hearing a lot of theoretical stuff recently. But the questions which I've got here pre-submitted are, how do I get grants? I've tried online, by email and by post, but didn't get any reply. And then the second supplementary question was just how to apply generally. So fortunately, we've got Lorna Reid from Citizens Advice Richmond and Lucy Byrne from Richmond AID. So I'm going to take Lorna first, but also Lucy, I'm going to ask you to unmute at the same time, so that if there's something which pops into the head, because one says and then the other one, and then it sparks off, and good. That's the way things would work. So Lorna, are you there?
Yeah, hi. Good evening, everybody. We've definitely got waiting times, and we are desperately working to get those waiting times down for the applications. And we understand when residents make an application, it is largely going to be at a time of need, and that need ideally would be realised at the point of application. But just to put it a little bit in context, we've received just shy of around about 550, 600 applications since June this year. So about 600 applications in 6 months, or 100 applications a month. And that's on top of our day job, which is to provide advice to residents. We're hugely proud and want to be able to administer the Household Support Fund, because we want to get that money into desperate households. People don't apply to the Household Support Fund if there isn't a real need. But I'd be being a little bit coy if I didn't say it was a huge demand on our already stretched resources. We don't have an easy answer to it, except to say that we will get round to everybody. I suppose what I would say to any resident who's either already applied or wants to apply, the more information that you can provide us with at the point of application. So give us a couple of months worth of bank statements, upload your fuel bills, give us some detail about household income. That will save us having to come back to you to ask for it. And when we do ask for it, I totally understand that it can feel quite intrusive to be asked to prove your difficulties. But unfortunately, we are dealing with the distribution of public funds, and there's an onus on us to carry out some due diligence. So when we're asking you to provide us with some information to support your application, we're doing it so that we can approve your application, not that we can deny your application. We've been doing this probably for about a year now to the day. I think the 6th of December, we started doing it last year, and then there was a slight hiatus in the springtime. And I think in all of that time, we've actively refused about 3 applications out of the hundreds that we've received. But unfortunately, we've had to not progress a lot more applications because we didn't have the information to support the application. So when we do ask for bank statements, I really want to reassure residents, all we're looking at is that bottom line. We're not interested in how money is spent. We've taken a discretionary view that we're going to allow an element of savings because we don't think it's the right thing that people should wait until there's nothing in the bank before they can seek assistance. If you're on benefits, we're going to automatically approve those applications. So when we ask you for proof of benefits, again, it's because we want to approve your application. But I suppose the short answer is there are many, many, many more people, unfortunately, having to apply to the Household Support Fund than we have resources to get through them. But I suppose, to coin a phrase, nobody's going to be left behind. But it may take a little longer than we want it to.
Thank you, Lorna. I'm going to bring in Lucy. Before I bring in Lucy, people may not be aware of who Richmond AID are. Plenty of people may know about Citizens Advice. Lucy, a quick word first about who Richmond AID are, and then any thoughts you may have on this question.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. So Richmond AID are a disability organisation, and we support people with a wide range of long-term health conditions and disabilities all across the borough. And we do have a number of advice services, and it fits quite well with us administering the Household Support Fund. In terms of accessibility, we try and make it as easy as possible to access our services. So you can email us, you can also phone us. So I know there was a question there about people being able to phone in. So absolutely, you can phone into our services. Sometimes people do need to leave a message, but we always get back to people within as reasonable a time frame as we can, which is usually just a couple of days. We are under considerable pressure at the moment, so sometimes it does take a day or two for us to be able to return your call. And people also drop in. So in the case that it's challenging for people to give us all the information they need, they can drop into our offices in Teddington and provide it, and we can photocopy it, and we will make that process as accessible and friendly as possible for people to be able to do it. I think, as Lorna said, we are under considerable pressure, so sometimes things take a little bit more time than we'd like it to. But yeah, if there is anyone that needs the Household Support Fund, we definitely would encourage you to apply. We can talk you through more about what it is and what it can be used for. And there is other grants available as well, not just the Household Support Fund. So there is lots of options if people are struggling financially.
Thank you. Just so people are aware, in case, as I say, then they're looking at the chat, Donovan is very helpfully putting details of each organisation and their website in the chat. I'm assuming by the fact that you're on the Zoom call that you are familiar with how to use online services. You may wish to assist other people who don't. The other thing to remember is that our libraries, if anybody just needs assistance to go in, if they don't have internet at home, if they don't have a smartphone, they can go into our local libraries and use the library online services there, and our teams in the libraries will be happy to help. Rosemary asks a very quick question, which Lucy will be able to ask. I'll just quickly ask it. Is Richmond AID the same as rules?
No, we're not, but I can understand why there might be some confusion. We're two disability organisations, and we work very closely together in the same building. So we provide different services, but we often work jointly together on projects. So rules run the social prescribing, and they often refer to our advice services. And we also jointly run some other projects like the Connect to Tech project, where we support people around IT. So, but we're not the same organisation.
Thank you. There was a second part of Nicolette's question, which was not necessarily related to how people can access services. I'm going to ask Ian Dodds to unmute for this, because it is, I think, a real concern for many, is that there's a fear of social workers in general, but particularly of poverty being a reason to take children from the home. Can you give any reassurance on that, Ian?
I can. So the role of a social worker, particularly where a family is facing poverty, is to provide support to that family so that they can safely care for their children at home. So our absolute goal is always to keep children with their families where it's safe for them to be there. We would only consider care proceedings, so removing a child from their home, either if the family thought that was the best thing to do, so it was a voluntary arrangement between the family and Children's Social Services, or if we felt the child was at significant risk of harm. And in order to take the child away, if we thought they were at significant risk of harm and place them with another family member or in foster care, we would need to demonstrate to the court that threshold had been met. So I would say that poverty in itself is not a reason for children to be taken from their families and placed in care, but it might be a contributing factor, but it would need to be, part of a wider issue around significant harm. So I would provide reassurance to families that isn't our aim as social workers.
Yeah, and nobody should be dissuaded from reaching out for help because of that fear.
No, and social workers are there to help families safely care for their children in the best way that they can.
Thank you. I've just noticed a quick update from Lorna from Citizens Advice in the chat, just noting that, yes, similarly with RAID, if people can only access by phone, then certainly a phone line is available, but it is quicker. It is quicker to go for online support and assistance. I'm going to bring in Richard Bennett, Councillor Richard Bennett, who has a question relating to the elderly persons within the borough.
Thank you, Gareth. Yes, we have a high percentage of the most elderly people in the borough actually living alone. And so my particular concern was with a cold spell, and if we're going to have a cold winter, that will mean that they have to be kept warm, and we should be worried about that. And also whether they have sufficient mobility in Arctic conditions to get out and about and get supplied with food. So the question is what actions can we take to help address that problem? And it's probably a question that's to more than the council, because there's an interested audience here in general. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. I'm going to see if any officers wish to raise a hand, because they may have an answer for that particular one. I'm not sure if we've got anybody from Adult Social Services here on the call. Avi.
Sorry, it took me a while to figure out how to raise my hands there. It's quite a wide-ranging question, isn't it? There's a lot to unpack there, but I thought there was a few different things that were worth mentioning. So obviously we have our warm spaces network, but recognise, in the current conditions that might not always be accessible to everybody. We also have a winter warmth service, and one of the populations there specifically, seeking to work with is older people living alone, to make sure that their homes are energy efficient and that they can take practical measures to help them keep warm at home. We're in the process of mapping out various food offers across the borough where older people and others in some cases can access food at a low cost or subsidised. We fund the benefits advice service provided by Age UK. And I should have mentioned as part of my presentation, and we've been successful in being selected for a London-wide pension credit campaign that London councils are leading on. So that's, obviously an important part of making sure that people have the money that they should have in their pocket. And I think it's already been mentioned, our libraries obviously can provide great assistance to people in accessing services where they're not online. I'm sure other people might have something to add to that.
And indeed so. I see that Lucy from Richmond AID has her hand raised.
Yeah, I just want to say that in terms of the shopping, there's some excellent neighbourhood care support groups in the borough, and between them they do cover the whole borough and they support older people. So there is that, and Age UK do a lot as well. I know that doesn't answer the question within the home, but there is actually quite a lot of support. And I think Susan can take the question about the energy side of things, the neighbourhood care groups to the shopping support and trips to hospitals and other healthcare settings as well.
Excellent. And as if by magic, here comes Susan, ready to come in on that.
Yeah, but we, SW LEAP, South West London Energy Advice Partnership, we offer free home energy visits or telephone calls to anybody in the borough who's struggling with their fuel costs. We can book reasonably quickly, certainly very quickly, for a phone call, and we're happy to go out to anyone's homes. And what we can do not only is help, but we, thanks to the council and other funders, we're able to put in free light bulbs, radiator foils and so on, and then advocate for people if they need advocating. So we can put them on to Citizens Advice, we can put them onto the household fund, speak to a councillor, whatever it is. So we can be quite a good point of contact. So we're very happy to sort of do that. We are now booking from January, I'm afraid. We haven't got any more availability until after Christmas, but we would be very interested to do that.
Thank you for that.
Okay.
The other thing which I would always stress for lots of things, not just for cost of living, not just for assisting the elderly with various things, is to encourage people to speak to their local councillors, because the local councillors will know where the support networks are. They will know about their own individual day centre in there. So mine would be Linden Hall, but there are other things in other areas. So is ask the local councillors, because Councillor Nancy Baldwin is coming in. I'm going to quickly unmute her whilst I'm sort of floundering around with this answer. But speak to your local councillors, because they will be able to give some guidance and advice. And if they don't know the answer, they will know somebody to ask. Nancy Baldwin is, for some reason, muted again.
Can't. Okay.
There we go.
Can you hear me? All right. I can't figure out how to make the camera work, but you can hear me. Thank you for the question, Councillor Bennett. And I think this, and I want to go on to what Councillor Roberts is saying, is that we councillors do know our areas really, really well. We know who are those people who are living alone, who is too stubborn to ask for help, who can we ask to get them to go and get these people together. So I always encourage local councillors to use their own initiative, in this case, to go out, seek out these people and help them. And this goes back to Nicolette's question as well. Not everybody is online, but the council gives me a laptop with a way to get onto an external website, so I can go and help somebody do that. So, and I'm very willing to do that for any of my residents. And I think, Councillor Bennett was quite right. It's not just the councils, it's all of us working together to bring people some help. So I'd like to thank everybody for what they're doing even tonight. And I will figure out how to make the camera work.
And Lorna is coming. This is you're mining a rich seam here this evening, Richard. So we're all wanting to come in.
I just wanted to reiterate what Nancy said about people who might not want to seek help, or more pertinently, I think what we see is people who don't think the help is there for them. I think we are moving into a space where poverty is another stigma. I don't think we've ever moved out of the space where debt is a stigma. I was previously a debt advisor, and I think we thought that we had done, but for those households, and I think you referred to them earlier, Gareth, those, we call them the newly affected or the new cohort, or households that have previously not had to face debt or bills mounting up. And for us at Citizens Advice, we cannot rest on our laurels and say that we are a household name, because thankfully, for the majority of households, we're not a household name. And I think that is hopefully true of our other colleagues in the voluntary and community sector. And I suppose my one takeaway from tonight is that we all activate our eyes and ears for our neighbours, for our friends, for our family, for somebody on the bus, that we are able to hold what can feel like quite difficult conversations around, I can see you need help and the help is out there. It's not but the help is out there and the help is out there. The help that we can all provide collectively, individually and collectively, it has to be a positive experience for households that are struggling. I don't know if you've guessed from the accent, but I'm Scottish, so with 4 inches of snow today, I gaily made my way to the train station and was literally gobsmacked that the trains were cancelled. I was like, what? Why are the trains cancelled? And so I've spent today at home and it's cold and we were able to put the heating on. I wouldn't want to be at home today if I was worried about putting the heating on. Because not only is that not healthy, I think almost superseding the health concerns, it's scary and it makes you feel worthless. So the stuff that Susan does, the stuff that Ray does, the stuff that Rose does, the stuff that we can do, we can genuinely make a difference. And we want to be able to reach residents. We've got our own programs about reaching out, but we also want everybody on this call tonight to help to reach into us. So if that's knocking on the door to a neighbour to say, listen, these guys aren't too scary, you know, they might be able to help you. Please do.
Thank you, Lorna. Just for those people who may not have noticed in the chat, Tony Patterson, another councillor who's on the call, has mentioned that he's just been assisting a local vulnerable housing association tenant with no heat for over a week. Richmond AID's handyman was invaluable when she could not get a fast enough response elsewhere. So asking for help from wherever help is available is I think, the key to this. I'm going to ask another question from the pre-submitted, because it's another one which is of lots of use. It's Alex Wilson, get ready to unmute, please. How can people who have already accessed grants from services access further financial support? Are you there? Has the little icon come up asking? There we go.
It has now. Thank you, Councillor Roberts. As Lucy mentioned, there are a number of other grants that households are able to apply for or have access to, as well as a number of other access points for support. So, for example, the council administers the discretionary housing payment scheme for households in receipt of housing benefit and universal credit. So those are families who need additional assistance in meeting their housing costs. The council tax reduction scheme also provides additional support to households on low incomes in receipt of benefits or are on
No, is that Alex that's frozen, or is it?
Yeah, it's Alex that's frozen.
Fortunately, I have some crib sheet notes here, so I'll take over from where Alex was. So, so let me see. So, in addition to the grants provided directly to households, oh, you're back. Oh, hang on, you're muted though. You'll do it so much better than I was, Alex. So here we go. There we go.
Sorry. Can you hear me?
Just about. It's oh, it's gone into mute again. I tell you what, I'll read the thing out and then maybe switch the camera. Oh, here we go. Here's Peter Ford. Peter Ford rushing to the rescue. Here we go. Peter.
Hi. Yeah, maybe I can finish off where Alex was saying. So, yes. Within the council, we administer council tax reduction scheme, which Alex was saying is generally aimed at households, low income, pensions or benefits which provides additional support with council tax. And also there is the discretionary housing payment scheme, which is aimed at people who pay rent, who are in receipt of either housing benefit or the housing element of universal credit, and where those benefits do not meet the full level of housing costs, they can apply to us for additional support. I mean, just in terms of numbers, we have around 5,000 households on housing benefit, and there will be more receiving housing support from universal credit. And we have about just over 8,000 households that get council tax reduction. So there is a significant number there. They generally are benefits that we have online claim forms for, but again, the council's call centre will assist and help people with applications if they haven't got the online facilities.
Thank you, Peter. There's a question asked in the chat by Nicolette. Nicolette, do you want to ask it yourself? It's regarding growing food on RHP land.
Yeah.
There we go.
One thing a lot of folks get muddled up with, they think the housing belongs to the council. And I'm forever having to explain, no, it's Richmond Housing Partnership, which is totally separate. And I'm just frightened is being left behind. Now we are talking with RHP and working very closely with Jim Millard, and we're making progress. We've got permission, we've put in bulbs for spring, but really, as this is a green borough and our neighbour is Kew Gardens, Barnes Common and Richmond Park, I really think we should be using parking bays and little patches to grow food. Now, I've had a few mothers interested and they'd like to try all sorts of veg. It doesn't have to be rows of cabbages, but I'd like to see more activity in growing food. Every bare bit of land should be used.
Excellent, good question. I'm going to bring in Siobhan Octay from our community engagement team. She was there a moment ago.
I'm still here.
Good, good.
This is an interesting night of spot the person speaking, or if you hear them speak. Nicolette, you sound like a perfect candidate for a programme that we have started relatively newly, which will please you no end. We've got a programme called the Community Ambassador Programme, which is directly for social housing tenants of all landlords, RHP of course being the biggest. And my very good colleague Sarah Campbell is the coordinator of that programme. I'm going to pop the link in like everyone does. But we have done exactly what you've described on RHP land in Twickenham with one of our ambassadors. Sounds similar to yourselves, desperate to get stuff done, turned over every stone in order to make it happen. We're doing a similar couple of projects up in Barnes and also working with Habitats and Heritage. So Nicolette, if you don't mind, well, you're obviously doing an awful lot in your own right, which people like you always do. The busiest people are the busiest. But we have got a program, we've got about 14 volunteers in different estates throughout the borough, and we are liaising, daily now. We have sort of privileged position with RHP in terms of contact and of those ambassadors and them being the voice to get things done. So I'll pop the address in the chat, and it sits on the website as everything else does. But you sound like a perfect candidate, so I might put you in touch with Sarah.
Thank you.
Excellent.
No worries,
Thank you for that. I'm keeping a scanning eye for little yellow hands in the participants list. I'm not seeing any of them. So I'll keep going with the pre-submitted questions. This one's for Alex Wilson. Get the unmute button hovering there. And the question is, it's regarding financial support for those on very low incomes. Now, I apologise. Hello. I'm going to mute you for a moment, Alex. You may have heard the answer to this question already, but it's important information and it bears repeating. So I'm going to bring Alex in. So what support is there for financial support, both for people on very low incomes, and whether there's also possibility for women living alone to access support? So I'll stop talking now to stop the feedback.
Second time lucky. Let's hope it works this time. I'll leave my camera off just in case that was what was disturbing the connection. As Aveen pointed out in her presentation, we have the virtual cost of living hub, and I mentioned it as well. You know, it really is central to signposting residents of our borough to support that either we provide central government assistance and also support and advice provided by the voluntary sector. So it includes grants and benefits to increase income and also advice and support on ways of reducing bills and household costs. Individual circumstances do vary considerably, and residents are encouraged to visit the hub to make sure they get the information they need to be able to access support and advice that they're entitled to. To make it easier, we've set up a free support calculator also that Aveen mentioned, that enables you to input information about income and personal circumstances, and it should signpost you to support that you may be entitled to and not currently claiming. There's also something called the Turn to Us grant checker that's also on the cost of living hub, which is also a helpful tool for residents to access. So we acknowledge that some residents may find it really difficult to navigate this information online. There's a lot of information there, and sort of getting through that might be more difficult. So support and advice is available from a range of voluntary sector organisations, not least of all Citizens Advice Richmond. And we also have received a number of calls already through our customer services team around queries around cost of living. We've talked about the household support fund already. We're just in the process of having the third tranche approved. This continues to provide funding to both the Citizens Advice Richmond and Richmond AID, so they can continue to administer the crisis funds that they've already talked about. We're continuing to fund the provision of free school meal vouchers during school holiday periods, and also support to care leavers with food and fuel payments. We're also proposing to make cost of living payments to households in receipt of housing benefit, council tax reduction, and also carers allowance, acknowledging that quite often these are households that have a number of additional costs around care, etc. We propose to make payments to households also in receipt of housing benefits, so they weren't in receipt of support under the previous tranches of the household support fund. So we've targeted some support to groups that we haven't given support to, but they're still vulnerable, low income cohorted households. I mentioned before about the data analytics work stream and the low income family tracker. That's going to be absolutely key in targeting some of our support to the most vulnerable families. I think just picking up on a point that Lorna made previously about that sort of engagement with families that perhaps haven't received support from the council before or find it difficult to ask for help. I think that's going to be key in how the council responds and some of the voluntary sector organisations. And we want to use the low income family tracker and the single view of debt system that we're going to develop to have those early conversations with households perhaps that are presenting themselves as becoming more vulnerable, so that we're able to engage with them and offer our support early rather than waiting until they get into a really serious crisis point before we are able to give them any support and help.
Thank you for that. I'm going to move. Oh,
sorry, Councillor Roberts, I forgot about the question around single.
Oh yes,
women
single
living
women.
alone. I think it's sort of captured by, you know, my answer to the previous question, really around that we do acknowledge that single income households are particularly vulnerable groups, but again, I would encourage people to access the cost of living and use the support calculator to help signpost them to additional support and help.
Thank you, Alex. Hang on. There we go. Back to the pre-submitted questions. This is quite niche in its formulation, but I think it has a broader scope here. So it's you'll understand when I've read what the question is. What are some ways in which Commonwealth citizens, i.e. those coming from or living in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, parts of Africa and the Caribbean, etc., can help provide effective solutions to those in the mother country still being affected by the cost of living crisis? How can we as the Commonwealth family contribute to the UK's well-being? Which is awfully nice. And it's nice to see that people from beyond these shores are looking to see what they can do to help. But I think that really it's a broader question about how anybody that wants to be able to offer support during this time of crisis can offer support during this time of crisis. So Aveen is going to assist with this particular one.
Yes, I think it clearly does have broader application. It was something that we were conscious of when the information on the hub was being developed, that we have lots of residents who are well placed to help, who are active in their communities and want to support others at this time. So there's quite a lot of information on there about potential routes to donation, volunteering and other ways that people can support locally or from a distance. So hopefully somebody will pop a link to that in the chat. Excellent.
Well, Donovan has been assiduous in sticking links into the chat, and I have no reason to doubt that he won't do now. Brian Riley, Deputy Chief Exec and also the lead officer on housing and such like, mentions that he's going to raise the enthusiasm for gardening and food growing projects with Richmond Housing Partnership's new Chief Executive when they come in post. So you may be aware that David Doan is stepping down and we will be having a new Chief Executive coming in. Lorna, you've mentioned something which I think people will find useful regarding the crisis prevention caseworker in the chat. Oh, hang on a moment. I see Nancy Baldwin wishing to come in, so I'm going to bring her in first and then ask you to come in, Lorna, about the crisis prevention caseworker.
Hi, thank you. It really goes back to the last thing of the offers of help from people from the Commonwealth and etc. Anyone can offer to help. And there is a section on the website because there will be people who are in a position, they don't need the extra heating payment that's being given by the government, and they can pass that on and it can be redistributed. So there's a whole raft of ways that people can help if that's what they're minded to do. And I just think it's wonderful when people say they'd like to.
Thank you, Nancy. Lorna, stand by. I'm pressing the button. There we go.
Yeah, it's just really what I've put in the chat. Richmond Council have really helpfully funded us for 12 months to employ what we're calling a crisis prevention caseworker, a cost of living caseworker, but we've chosen the term crisis prevention because we want this to be early intervention. So Aisha Buban started with us today. Hora and I were both standing outside our respective train stations, phoning each other, saying, "Oh, all the trains are cancelled." But Aisha is with us, so she's got a couple of days induction with us. So really, it'll be in the new year when we're able to roll out the service. We've got a meeting with libraries on Friday. So initially, Aisha will be operating out of Ham and Whitton libraries. It is not postcode restricted, although we understand that being local is very important. But part of Aisha's role is to, with support from the organisation, is to find other outreach venues to deliver from. We absolutely want to take advice into the community. It kind of comes on the back of what I was saying earlier, that we are not necessarily a household name, and of that I'm equally proud. So we are going to where residents are rather than expecting residents to find us. But as soon as we have drummed down the details, certainly for Whitton and Ham, and ongoing over the next 12 months, we'll be uploading that information on our website and cascading it through the council's communications as well.
Excellent. I was concerned with the comment because it said outside of Ham Library. I was like, in this weather. Bring them in. It's nippy. So thank you very much for that, Lauren. It's appreciated. I'm going to bring in Ian Dodds. Good question, this one. What support options are there for a family with a newborn baby, or indeed any children, I suppose, but it says a newborn baby specific here.
So I think the best advice I could give to somebody with a newborn baby is to visit their local children's centre. So there are 6 of those in the borough, and there'll be a number of professionals, including childcare professionals who work in the children's centres, who will be able to provide a range of advice. They'll be able to advise on activities and support available from voluntary sector organisations like Home Start, but they'll also be able to point new parents towards some of the grants and benefits that are available to them, to make sure that they're registered for things like child benefit, which is a non-means tested benefit, but also some more benefit related payments like the Sure Start maternity grant and Healthy Start vouchers, which provide things like milk and vitamins for your baby. Also, I'd just give a shout out to health visitors. So every new parent will have a health visitor, and health visitors are also a really important source of information, advice and guidance for new parents. So I think there is plenty out there, and a good access point for that is children's centres.
Yep, and also on the cost of living hub, which we've talked a lot about, particularly this business about the Sure Start maternity grant. That's for people on benefits, or certain benefits.
Yeah, it's a benefit-related payment. So it's a £500 payment for eligible families who have a new baby.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. It's useful information. Where are we? Where next? I'm going to go to a question in the chat from Councillor Crookdale again. Well, let's unmute you. You can ask this yourself. Where are we? There we go.
No, I was just wondering if LIFT is already being used, or if it's still in development, and if it is in development, when will it be ready for use?
For those of us not familiar with the acronym, what's LIFT? Oh, you've muted yourself. Hang on.
Sorry, it's the low income family tracker that was being discussed earlier.
Ah, who's able to assist with this? Is it Aveen? Aveen, rather. We're trying to. There we go.
I can. Alex is leading on this, so she may want to come in it. But the short answer is yes, it is in development. It'll probably be, I think, February is the timescale for the first kind of products coming out of that. There's a bit of work involved in connecting different data sets together, as I'm sure you can imagine. And we've just literally, we're just out to procure on that at the minute.
Excellent, thank you, Alex.
I think Aveen's ably answered that. Yeah, so we're in the procurement stage at the moment, and just sorting out the data protection issues around it. And once that's done, we're hoping to get the first data sets out and ready to go in with our first campaign sort of February, March time. Aligned with that, through Policy and Practice, who have developed the low income family tracker, we, as Aveen mentioned at the start in her presentation, we're also taking part in the London Council's pension credit campaign, which Policy and Practice are leading on. So those two are sort of intertwined. But yeah, work is certainly in train on getting that up and ready.
Thank you. Just so people are aware, there's Lucy from, Lucy from Richmond AID mentioned Grow Baby, which is a local charity that supports families in Richmond and Kingston. Well, don't be afraid to put things in the chat, because we're going to be capturing everything that's in the chat, and it will go in as part of a sort of a FAQ thing. If you've been to these, the last time we were doing all of these things was during COVID, which seems years ago, but it was only 18 months. So we always capture what's going in the chat, bits and pieces of information which people might find useful, and it will go out as part of the FAQs, which often accompany this sort of thing. Right, where are we next? Trying to find my questions. A joint question, which I'm going to put to Robin Brown and Fenella Merry. First part of the question, which either of them may wish to answer, is the council likely to have a council increase in 2023? And the second question is, will there be a reduction for council taxpayers during the crisis?
Shall I have the first stab at that one?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the short answer is we really don't want to be putting up council tax at a time when everyone's really, already highly pressurised. But as I alluded to earlier, the council finds itself in a financial situation that's quite difficult and will be quite hard to square the budget without some form of increase. The government has recently announced that councils will be able to put council tax up by 3% for core services and a further 2% for adult social care, which has obviously been under particular pressure. So that would be a total of 5. As the absolute maximum. Their work on how councils are funded assumes that all councils are going to do that. We will have to look hard at that in the context of the rest of our budget, and I think probably in February we'll be coming forward with where that whole conversation has ended up. But I think it's going to be really hard for us to get away without an increase, without jeopardising the council's finances.
Thank you. Fenella, are you there? Do you have anything you wish to add?
So the only thing I would say on that is the maximum of 5% is still way short of the inflation pressures that the council is facing. So, that is still going to leave us in a difficult position. We will still have support to low-income households, specifically around council tax reduction, but also, as others have said, Alex and Aveen have said, very keen to do the proactive work on pension credits, on increasing take-up of free school meals, of healthy start vouchers. So there's lots and lots of things that we'll be doing alongside the cost of living work that will hopefully help to improve the financial resilience longer term, actually, for households in the borough. So not just about council tax levels, but also helping people in the longer term with their budgeting and helping them to access funding that they're entitled to that they might not be aware of.
Yeah, it's worth also bearing in mind, I think, it would be terribly cowardly of me to not give any thought on this particular question and just leave it all to Fenella and Robin. It would be terribly easy to go for the cheap populist thing of either reducing or freezing. But we have to remember that quite often the vast majority of money spent on council tax is for those people who need it most. A large amount goes on adult social care, huge amount goes on children and children's services and education. And if we were to start either reducing or artificially freezing, then it limits the ability the council has to help people at times of crisis. So sometimes, I think what we're looking at is, say it was 5% on a band D, I think it's something about £80 a year, so just over £1 a week is what's being looked at, and you can do an awful amount with that sort of money. Whereas taking the money away means you simply can't offer the services to people who need it. So there we are. But we will be announcing the council tax deliberations in the new year. Where are we next? Here we are. Follows in quite nicely, this one. This one is for Aveen. In this borough, some residents will be property rich, but cash poor. How might they be affected by the current squeeze, and how might they gain assistance?
So, so we've done quite a lot of data analysis, as I've alluded to in the presentation, and I think I already spoke about one of the key groups being affected locally are low-income families with mortgages, which is about 1,000 households in the borough, and we know that over 40% of people in that group have no savings. And I think I already touched in the presentation on the type of pressure points we'd be expecting them to experience around energy, increase in housing costs, and the cost of transport, etc. So obviously, you know, all of the different strands of the cost of living response are potentially relevant to them. In terms of eligibility for specific support, I think it probably comes back to some of the grants and funds available that Alex has already talked through, but it very much depends on individual circumstances, and people do need to check or be supported to check what they're entitled to through the support calculator, or turn to us grants, because individual circumstances do vary so much depending on what people have and their situation.
Okay, thank you for that. Just a quick note from Nicolette in the chat, which I'll just quickly address. It says, surely there must be a faster way of syncing between councils and charities. It's endless providing paperwork online or photocopies, and it's, if poor folk have been highlighted, oh crikey, no, it's just lost it. You can either do things quickly or you can do things properly. And often if you do things quickly, you make mistakes and people get missed out. And sometimes if you do things quickly, then people will exploit a system. I made no mention of Lady Moan. But, you know, you need to make sure that there are proper checks and balances, because there is a finite pot available. There's a finite pot of money available to help people. And we need to make sure that the right people are getting the right levels of support. So yes, I appreciate that sometimes it does feel as though things take a little bit of time, but hopefully by making sure that we're getting the money to the right people, it means that there's going to be more money in the long run for the people who need it most. Let me see, where are we with the chat? Siobhan's just quite rightly reminds me about Extra Mile in Hampton, which does lots of good stuff regarding either new or nearly new items for people with small babies. Here's a question. Back to Aveen, ready to unmute. Is there a package or consultation to address the potential oversight of the Black community in particular, due to arguably fewer support systems being in place?
So we've started work on an equality impact needs assessment to really look at the planks that we've put in place as part of our response, to assess, are there any gaps? Are there areas where uptake isn't what we would expect, areas where we need to change tack from the early kind of indication of impact from the things that we've put in place over the last couple of months and weeks. So we started work on that, and we hope to have some findings from that in the new year, which will help continue to kind of tailor the response going forward. But I'd appreciate any specific views that anybody has on that and wants to share that could help inform the needs assessment.
Thank you. Lorna is wishing to come in. I'm pressing the button there.
Yeah, just following on from this, I've lived and worked in Islington for many, many years. So it's very inner city borough with enormous diversity. And what often comes with that are very organic and homegrown community support that can bring issues to the council's attention. My previous job was at Kensington, Chelsea, North Kensington after the Grenfell Tower fire, and of course there was always a great community diversity and support there, which expanded after the fire, unfortunately. And what slightly worries me coming into Richmond is, whilst I really admire the kind of collegiate and incredible support within the community and voluntary sector, is that we don't necessarily have those community organisations to support our Black and ethnic minority residents. So it almost feels like the council and ourselves as voluntary and community sector members need to work harder, because there aren't those mechanisms to refer into us. And I think this is our prime opportunity for us to look at how do we reach out in the absence of there being, if you like, a series of machines that can refer in. Because it can be very easy to say, we don't know what's out there, and that's not good enough. We need to know what's out there. And I don't say that as a criticism, I say it as a call to action that we would obviously want to be part of as well.
No, it is a good point. We do try to work as close as we can. Many people will be aware of Ravi Aurora and Multicultural Richmond, for example, but there is always more that we can do to reach out to those. Richmond is quite a lot of people well placed to have loud voices, and sometimes it's the voices less heard that we need to do more to reach out to. Let me just see, there's one further message. Okay, so I'm looking for yellow hands because I've reached the end of my pre-submitted questions. So this is really the last attempt. If anybody has something which is burning, pressing, or in any other way urgent that they wish to raise before I do the final thought thing. No. Okay. I'd like to thank everybody who took part, all of the officers and the councillors who were able to offer answers and advice on any of the questions. So those people who, the people who turned up to ask the questions, which is the most important, and those who submitted them in advance. I think there are a couple of major takeaways from this meeting, and the first one is to encourage, if people need help, is to encourage people to ask for help. It might not always be there, but the first step is to ask for help. And if we can't give that specific type of help, there may be other pathfinding, there may be other directions, there may be other signposts that we can say, look, we can't do it. However, we know the people who can. So we do need to try to make sure that everybody feels able to ask for help. There has to be also a recognition that with limited resources, there is a limited amount of support which can be given. However, we will always try, whenever we possibly can, to make sure that we are giving the right advice, the right support, and in sometimes the right financial support for those who need assistance. It's going to be horrible for many people over the next few months. Christmas is coming and people will feel encouraged still to go out and spend money that they simply don't have. And while we may be having a look at the problems with debt and the problems with affordability and finances that some people have got, I very much fear that we're only seeing the tip at the moment, because the real problem, I think, is going to come after Christmas, when people start looking at the bank statements, when they start looking at the credit card statements, and really see the impact that Christmas, though a wonderful time, of course, has had on their personal finances. So we will continue these conversations, we will continue offering the support, and we will continue with your support, helping those people who need it here in this borough. So thank you very much for coming along this evening. If there is anything you'd like to raise, you can always find a way to get hold of me through the council website. Just search Leader of the Council in the council search function, and you'll find out how to contact me. And I hope you have a very pleasant and above all, warm rest of the evening. Okay, thank you very much for your time today. Take care. Bye-bye.